Sorry about the technical difficulties. I think we are ready to begin. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I think we are ready to. Let's start. Hello and welcome to today's session. I'm Beth and I'm a member of the Student Academic Success team at Ambrose University. Whether you're joining us live or watching us later, I'm delighted to have you here today. If you're participating in real time, I'd encourage you to participate by asking questions and making comments along the way. You can do so by signing into your YouTube account and joining us in the live chat. Both for my sake and for the sake of other students, please take a moment to introduce yourself. So you can just take a moment and join us in the live chat. Whether you're joining us live or watching us later, I'm delighted to have you here today. If you're participating in real time, I'd encourage you to participate by asking questions and making comments along the way. You can do so by signing into your YouTube account and joining us in the live chat. Both for my sake and for the sake of other students, please take a moment to introduce yourself. So you can just take a moment and join us in the live chat. Whether you're joining us live or watching us later, I'm delighted to have you here today. If you're participating in real time, I'd encourage you to participate by asking questions and making comments along the way. You can do so by signing into your YouTube account. All right, we hope that you do join us in the live chat. Our topic today is academic integrity. We often think of academic integrity as a list of do's and don'ts. Do your own work. Don't cheat on your exams. Cite your sources. Don't lie about your work. And all of those things are important. But sometimes when we focus on the do's and don'ts, we lose the bigger picture, the reason behind all of these things. So I want to start today by reflecting on why we should care. To get there, let's talk about some news stories from the past few years. 2 years ago, in 2018, an expose revealed that more than 250 YouTube stars in the UK were being paid to promote a service called Edgebirdie, which allows students to buy papers online rather than doing the work themselves. Last year, more than 30 parents were charged for cheating the college admissions system in the US by bribing agents to let their students in, even though the kids did not meet the academic standards. And it's not just in the UK or the US either. In 2017, a University of Toronto tribunal found the former head of the Toronto Public School Board to have plagiarized several sections of his PhD thesis, including some sections 9 pages long. Last December, the police were called in to investigate a case at SFU where a student had allegedly paid someone else to take her exam for her. And this spring, the University of Calgary investigated an incident where students were sharing answers to a tutorial exercise in an online chat room. Now, these situations obviously have consequences for the people involved. For the students, there may be consequences for their grades. For the parents, for the exam impersonator, there may be legal consequences. But who else does academic misconduct hurt? Think about this for a second. Let's say that you're a student at one of those schools. You've done all of your work legitimately. Why should you, as a student, care about these scandals? Why should the institution care? Why should the public care? If you're joining us live, take a moment and share your answers in the chat. And as you're thinking, I'll just flip through some of these cases that have occurred. Here's the case of the YouTube stars promoting Edgebirdie. This is the case of the admissions scandal in the US. The Toronto School Board director accused of plagiarizing in his PhD. A woman taking an exam at SFU for someone else. And then University of Calgary students accused of academic misconduct for
sharing answers in a chat room. Now, while you're thinking, let's talk a little bit about the term academic integrity. When we use the phrase academic integrity, we're invoking the idea of ethics or morality. When we say that something has integrity, we mean that it is complete and unviolated. It hasn't been corrupted or distorted. When we have good integrity as individuals, we've chosen not to let our moral standards slide, not to let our ethical values erode away. Now let's bring that concept to education. Thomas Lancaster, a researcher on academic integrity, says that authentic education happens when the teacher and the student are in direct relationship, both participating thoroughly and honestly in the learning exchange. This is a transformational relationship. The student doesn't just walk out with a piece of paper, but actually walks out with new knowledge and a new way of thinking. This is what academic integrity looks like. But sometimes that experience of academic integrity gets corrupted. And it gets corrupted when there's a third party that enters into that relationship. That third party can be anyone, a friend, a parent, an anonymous person on the internet. But the key thing is that instead of taking responsibility for his or her own learning, the student passes that task off to a third party. That third party can be anyone, but the student is presenting that third party's work as his or her own. This is not what education is supposed to be like. And in fact, it eats away at the very purpose of education. Here, the student is treating education just like a transaction, like at the grocery store. I give you the assignment, you give me the grade. I give you the tuition dollars, you give me the degree. But the student is missing the point. Education is about transformation. It's about learning and growing. And you can't do that if a third party is doing the work for you. There are many types of academic misconduct, from plagiarism to having somebody take your exam for you, but all of them share this characteristic. The student is relying on a third party, but submitting that work as if it is the student's own. In the case of plagiarism, the student is using the words or ideas of the third party as if they were his or her own. In the case of cheating, the student is having somebody else complete the work for him or her and presenting it as his or her own. Either way, plagiarism and cheating erode the whole purpose of education, which is really about learning. With that in mind, let's come back to our original question. So if you've joined us in the chat, love to see your answers. Adrian is saying that integrity is important to know how to learn how to do your job, to do it authentically, to do it well. Absolutely, for sure. If you haven't joined us yet in the chat, please do. Please introduce yourself. Lucas, it's great to see you here as well. Now, if I were a student at one of these universities, I would be concerned about a few things. I'd be concerned about fairness. Here I am putting in all of this work and other people are getting degrees without putting in that effort. That's not okay. That's not fair. If I were a leader at one of the universities where students were cheating or plagiarizing in some fashion, I would be concerned about the integrity, about the reputation of the university. Will people still take the degrees from this institution seriously? I'd also be concerned if I were a graduate of the university for very similar reasons. And if I were a member of the general public, I might be concerned to think that people could be graduating from university without the skills they're supposed to have. And that's the point that Adrian is making. Can I trust that these people know what they're doing? And can I trust them to behave ethically in the future? If they've behaved unethically in their education, how will I know that they're going to behave ethically in the workplace? Academic misconduct is not a victimless crime. It's something that hurts us all by undermining our education and our trust in the educational system. Sometimes we have the impression that if nobody really knows, it's not a really big deal, but it actually can harm the whole system, destroys our social trust. So we all need to do our part to uphold academic integrity. Now, academic integrity is not always easy. In fact, like most things in ethics, we only really think about it when it isn't easy. It's when we really want to tell a lie that our value of honesty has to kick in. It's when we most want to avoid responsibility for something that we've done that our ethics really matter the most. So the International Center for Academic Integrity offers kind of a valuable definition of integrity for us. The International Center for Academic Integrity, the ICAI, defines academic integrity as, quote, a commitment to 5 fundamental values: honesty, trust, fairness, respect, and responsibility. Plus, they say, the courage to act on them, even in the face of adversity. One thing I like about this definition is that it reminds us of the value of responsibility. Taking responsibility is essential to the whole process of education. If we're really going to learn, we have to do our part. We have to put our best effort into the exchange with our instructors and with our classmates to really get what we need out of it. The other thing I like about this definition is how it points out that sometimes good people make bad decisions. Most of the time, most of us value these things: honesty, trust, fairness, all of it. But when we get stressed or when things get murky, we make poor decisions. So when they say that we need courage to uphold these values even in the face of adversity, they're pointing out that sometimes we're all tempted, that we may be good people, but sometimes under pressure, we make bad decisions. So I think that the definition is helpful in that respect. Now, at Ambrose, our academic calendar, which is published by the Office of the Registrar, outlines 3 broad ways that academic integrity can be eroded. First, it gives us a general definition of academic integrity. It says academic dishonesty. It says academic dishonesty is defined as any attempt to obtain credit for academic work through fraudulent, deceptive, or dishonest means. Then it narrows in a little bit to a specific type of academic dishonesty: cheating. It says, quote, cheating includes but is not limited to sitting for an examination by surrogate or acting as a surrogate, tampering or attempting to tamper with examinations, grades, or class records, communicating with another student during an examination in a dishonest way, bringing into an examination any textbook, notebook, paper, information, or electronic device not authorized by the instructor or examiner, consulting any person or materials outside of the examination room without permission to do so, attempting to read other students' examination papers, or allowing another student to read your own examination paper. And finally, it gives us a definition of plagiarism. Plagiarism involves presenting someone else's ideas, words, or work as one's own. Plagiarism is fraud and theft, but plagiarism can also occur by accident when a student fails or forgets to give credit to another person's ideas or words. Plagiarism includes, but is not limited to, submitting work previously submitted in another course without the consent of the instructor, representing the words, ideas, or work of another as one's own in any academic exercise, and conducting any act that defrauds the academic process, the learning exchange. Nearly all forms of plagiarism can be avoided by giving credit to others whenever using another person's ideas, opinion, or theory, any facts, statistics, graphs, drawings, i.e. any piece of information that is not common knowledge, quotations of another person's actual spoken or written words, and a paraphrase of another person's spoken or written words. Now, there's some important pieces in there. One thing you'll notice there is that one form of plagiarism is submitting work that you've already submitted. In other words, you're not really doing the work to do the learning, you're taking a shortcut. You can also notice here that plagiarism includes both words and ideas, that both of these can belong to someone else. So there's quite a lot in here. The calendar also explains the consequences, which can range anywhere from getting an F on the assignment to actually being dismissed from university. Sadly, there have also been cases where universities have had to rescind a degree that has already been given because they've found that someone did not earn it fairly. So that the scope of consequences can be huge, and that's outlined in the calendar as well. Other universities offer similar information. You'll find this information everywhere. It's in your syllabus, it's on the university website. Your professors probably talk about it in class too. But still, academic dishonesty happens. It's not terribly easy to collect data on plagiarism and cheating, but researcher Tracy Braytag suggests that in universities across the globe, approximately 6 to 10% of students participate in cheating behaviors. Another group of researchers, Guy Curtis and Joseph Clare, have found evidence that approximately 3.5% of post-secondary students have submitted assignments that they have purchased online in their own name. And of these students who have done that, who have bought a paper and submitted it, or found a paper and submitted it, more than 60% did so more than once. It happens at Ambrose too. Sadly, Ambrose has several cases of plagiarism and cheating every year. Why do people cheat and plagiarize? Well, as we talked about earlier, most of us are pretty ethical under normal circumstances, but problems come up when we're under pressure. Sometimes students cut corners on their work when they're feeling stressed or desperate. For example, maybe I'm afraid I'm going to fail the course. What will my family think? Maybe I should just get a bit of extra help on the assignment. Or maybe it's the night before the paper's due and I just haven't had time to get started. I could stay up all night and do kind of a lousy job on the paper, or I could get somebody else to do it for me. It might still be lousy, but at least then I can get some sleep. Sometimes it happens when we kind of lose faith in the learning experience, when we forget that the purpose isn't just to get a piece of paper with a degree or just to get a job. We forget that it's really all about transformation, and we decide that it's really not a big deal if somebody else finishes the assignment for us. Sometimes it also happens out of carelessness. We haven't really taken the time to understand how citation works, or we haven't been careful enough with how we've taken our notes, and so we just kind of let things slip. Whatever the precise reason, it's usually in those moments of adversity, as the ICAI signals. It's in the moments of adversity that we let our standards slip. We like to think of it being those bad people over there that run into these problems, but it can actually happen to any of us. Sometimes we even justify our own behavior. In his 2016 book, Moral Disengagement: How People Do Harm and Live with Themselves, psychologist Albert Bandura suggests that when we do things that we know are harmful, we usually try to justify them by explaining to ourselves and perhaps to others why these actions are actually good. He outlines 3 mechanisms that we use to justify our behavior to others. First, we often use what he calls advantageous comparison. Basically, we say to ourselves, well, maybe this isn't the greatest, but I'm not as bad as everyone else. For example, so yeah, I didn't really report all of my tips on my income tax, but at least I paid income tax. There are tons of people who don't even do that. Second, we sometimes use moral justification. Here, we kind of explain to ourselves that the other person or the other party, the institution that we're interacting with, somehow deserves the action that we're taking. For example, we might say, oh, the whole system is corrupt anyway. In the tax system, the good suffer and the poor the bad flourish. I'm just taking what belongs to me. Or we might say, well, they didn't really explain how I was supposed to report my tips. Why should I bother to figure it out? It's really their fault anyway. The third mechanism we use to justify ourselves is through euphemistic language. We say things like, I'm not really cheating on my taxes. I'm just, saving a little bit of money. Have you ever caught yourself saying something like that? I know I have. But are these really good reasons for us to do something harmful? Is it okay to do something bad just because other people do something worse? Is it okay not to report my income on my taxes just because I don't know how the forms work? Not really. We need to hold ourselves to higher standards. Bandura's model of moral disengagement is helpful because it helps us see how all of us can be susceptible to moral failures. we can all let our standards erode. So how can you help prevent this from happening to you or to people that you care about? Well, we know that these are kinds of issues usually come up when we're in difficult situations. So one of the things that we can do is to take proactive measures to avoid those crises. If I leave my paper until the night before it's due, I will probably feel more tempted to copy what someone else has done. So maybe I should try to get my paper done early. Maybe I'm afraid that I'm not doing well in a course and I think I might fail. If I keep letting that pressure build and build and build, I might get to a point where I feel like I have no choice but to cheat. But what if I just choose not to let the situation get that bad? Couldn't I go to the professor or a tutor for help to start with, to avoid getting myself into that situation? One of the best things we can do is to try to avoid these crisis moments. Granted, we probably can't avoid them all, but so many of them are really self-inflicted. We could choose otherwise. So let's try to make positive, proactive choices. Another time we know that these issues come up is when we're careless. Maybe I haven't really had time to understand how APA citation works, or I don't really know how to paraphrase my research, or maybe I got sloppy when I was taking my notes and I don't have time to go back now and figure it out. Again, we can choose to avoid those issues with academic integrity by proactively educating ourselves and taking care with our work. Now, that said, we can't always avoid those hard moments. So we also need to practice responding ethically when those moments of crisis do come up. They will. But it's a lot easier to make the right decision when we've built up our standards and built up the habits that allow us to make good decisions. So we need to talk about these issues. We need to think about the gray spots, the places where decisions don't quite seem black and white, and how we make good decisions in those cases. The last thing that we can do is be advocates for the real purpose of education, which is really learning. We can stand up for the value of doing the work ourselves and help to educate others about the value of academic integrity. As a starting point, I want to think through a few of those murky situations, the situations where we're not always sure what to do. And as we talk through them, I want you to think about three things, three questions. So first, in each situation, is there a violation of academic integrity? Are our standards somehow being eroded? Second, what are the underlying values and motives of the students, of the classmates, of the faculty that are involved in the situation? And then third, do you see any signs of moral disengagement, of Bandura's ideas of the three different ways that we kind of justify our decisions? So let's look at a couple of scenarios together. First, let's imagine that a friend is struggling with a lab assignment. Now, perhaps you did that assignment last year and it was really quite hard. And the student has explained to you that she feels anxious talking to the prof about it. And you kind of weren't sure about the professor either. You didn't really feel like the professor graded it fairly last year. So your friend asks you for a copy of your assignment, just as a sample. And she says she won't copy it. She'll just use it as an example to help her. First of all, is there an erosion of academic integrity here? Is there some way in which our standards are slipping? Well, this one might be a little bit unclear. Your friend has promised that she's not just going to copy your work. But once you've given her your assignment, how do you know what she's going to do with it? And if she does copy it, where does that leave you? Not in a really great position. Also, let's think about the second question. What are the values and motives here? Well, she's looking for help. That's a good thing. And you want to help. Also a good thing. But is this the best way for her to get help? What do you think? Probably not. Wouldn't it be better for her to get help, to get somebody to help her understand all the steps of the lab assignment rather than just giving her the answers. And then also notice that she seems to be afraid of talking to her professor. Maybe you could just help her go and talk to the prof instead. Now, how about moral disengagement here? Moral disengagement. Well, let's take a look at that. It sounds like there's a bit of moral justification going on here. In this case, the helper, you, is kind of saying, well, it's not really a fair assignment anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So it's kind of justifying the decision. So what is our ultimate decision? Well, maybe it's not exactly cheating to give your friend the completed assignment, but it's probably also not a good idea. It's not going to help her in the long run. It's not really helping her learn. And so in that case, it's kind of undermining or undercutting the purpose of the assignment, the purpose of learning. So it's kind of at its core, even though the action isn't necessarily wrong, it's undermining academic integrity. Let's look at another scenario. In this scenario, Susan is writing a history paper, a philosophy paper, and a biolab this week. So she's really busy and she's feeling a little bit overwhelmed. She's jotted down some ideas for the history paper, but she hasn't actually had time to turn them into a proper paper. So her boyfriend offers to write the first draft for her using her ideas. And he's like, oh, you can change things later. I'll just kind of get it going for you. Susan feels relieved. Besides, it's not really like plagiarism or something. She thought of all the ideas herself. So think about our three questions here. Is this a violation of academic integrity? What are the values and motives going on? And do you see any evidence of moral disengagement? In terms of violation of academic integrity, yes, I think there's a clear violation here. By submitting this paper, Susan will be representing a third party's work, her boyfriend's work, as if it's her own. She's not really doing all the work, but she's pretending that she is. She's also not really learning from the experience in the way that she's supposed to. In terms of what are the values and motives, she just wants to be done. She's not really interested in learning anymore. She just wants it out of her way. Also notice, well, her boyfriend is kind of in the similar position. He's just seeing learning as a transaction. You just have to submit the assignment. Who cares how it gets done? The other thing that's interesting here is that she doesn't really see communication as part of the assignment. She seems to be suggesting that really the only thing that matters is the content of the assignment, and she's done that. But she's not recognizing that communication is actually part of the learning experience, that she can learn to be a better communicator through this process. And she's cheating herself of that kind of learning. Now, in terms of moral disengagement, we do see, I think, some moral disengagement here at the end, some euphemisms actually. Susan says at the end, it's not really plagiarism. She thought of all the ideas herself. So she thinks of herself as just getting help with the writing. She's not actually breaking the rules or anything. So there's some euphemistic substitution here too. What would be a better choice for Susan in this situation? Well, couple of options. She could maybe ask for an extension. Now, there's no guarantee that she will be granted an extension. Maybe she should have worked on the paper a couple of weeks ago already. And her professor would be fair to not grant the extension to her, but she could try, she could ask. And if she can't get the extension, she should probably at least try to do it herself. It's better to do kind of a mediocre job herself than to take a risk and give somebody else the responsibility for it. At the very least, she can do it herself. Let's look at another scenario. Luke has been working on his theology paper for weeks, and he's gotten notes from a dozen books and articles. As he's writing, he realizes that he doesn't remember where one of his points is from. He thinks, well, it might have been somebody else's idea, but then again, it might have been my idea as I was kind of reading other people's stuff. He doesn't really have time to go through all of his sources and check to figure out if it was his or if it was somebody else's. So he decides to not worry too much because it was just a sub point anyway. Again, our three questions here. Is there a violation of academic integrity? What are the values and motives of the different parties here? And do you see any sign of moral disengagement? Is there a violation of academic integrity? Quite possibly. What if it is somebody else's idea? Then he has used a third party's idea without giving credit for it. What are the values and motives? Well, here's where things get a little bit iffy too, in that Luke isn't really interested any longer in the learning experience, in doing things fairly and justly. Those aren't his values anymore. His value is time. And as much as time is a real priority for many of us in many cases, that shouldn't be his ultimate learning goal. His learning goal should be to learn, not just get it done. He's kind of forgotten to see that it's about that academic integrity is about fairness. So his values have kind of gotten twisted. Do you see any evidence of moral disengagement? Well, he says, oh, it's just a small thing. It's not really a big deal. It's not academic dishonesty. It's just kind of cutting a corner. It's just kind of not a big deal. What would be a better choice for Luke? Well, he could leave the point out if he's not confident, whether it's his or somebody else's, or maybe he really wants to include that point. There might still be a way to handle it. Maybe he could explain what happened to the professor and say, hey, I really want to cite this accurately, but I just need a little bit of extra time. Maybe the professor will give him that time. Maybe not. And then maybe he can ask for the professor's advice on what to do. There's got to be another option here for Luke. Let's look at one more here. Professor J has assigned an open book exam. You have 48 hours to complete it. About 24 hours in, you get a message from a friend inviting you to an online study session where you can work on the last few answers together. It's an open book exam, so you figure it's all right. Again, our questions. Is it a violation of academic integrity? Well, possibly. Professor J has said that you can use resources, it's open book, but can you work together? It's unclear. What are the values and motives? Well, your professor's motive, we don't know, but we can assume that your professor wants you to learn something from it. Are you going to learn more if you do it yourself, or are you going to learn it more if you're doing it together? It's a little, we'd have to kind of think that through a little bit. Likely you're going to learn more if you do it on your own. So likely that's what your professor wants you to do. We don't know for sure though. It's a little hard to tell. We would want to check. Your friend's motive is probably to save time. Okay, we get that. Is that a good enough motive? Probably not. This is about the learning experience. How about you? There's maybe a little bit of carelessness here, being like, well, it must be all right. Couldn't you check? And then on the moral disengagement side, again, there's maybe a suggestion that we're not really interested here in learning for its own value, not really interested in checking to see if it's okay either. What would be the better choice? Ask the professor. You still have 24 hours. I'm sure you could email the professor or contact the professor to ask. And if in doubt, do it yourself. Now, these situations are like, in some ways, they're not necessarily real life situations, but they should get us thinking about our choices. No matter what the situation, there is always another choice. We can always choose to maintain our academic integrity, to hold those standards high, both for our own sake and for the sake of the whole educational enterprise, for the purpose of learning together. Now, we are coming to the end of our time together, so I want to give you a chance to ask questions or share your comments. So if you're joining us live, go ahead, type any thoughts or comments into the live chat. Another great way to learn more is to attend our upcoming workshops on research skills and citation. As we talked about, it's easy to get yourself into a position where you let your standards slide if you haven't been proactive about developing your skills. These workshops are a great way to be proactive, to develop your skills so you don't get yourself into these situations. So our sessions will equip you with the skills that you need to do your research, to cite properly, to do all of those things so you don't get yourself into those challenging, difficult moments where you have to make an ethical decision. You'll learn in these sessions how to find good resources, how to paraphrase, quote, and summarize fairly, how to cite your sources accurately, all those things that you need so that you can maintain good academic integrity. I also think that when you develop those strong research skills, you'll feel more competent and you'll feel less tempted to cut corners in your work. So I would encourage you to invest seriously in these skills. With that, I do want to take a look in the live chat for questions or comments. I'm not seeing any right now. However, if you do have any questions after this, please don't hesitate to email us at studentsuccess@ambrose.edu. There are also a lot of other allies for you in talking about academic integrity. You can talk to your professors. You can talk to the registrar's office. They're involved in kind of explaining and upholding academic integrity. You can talk to a tutor or someone in the writing center. All of these folks are very much on your side to help prepare you for success. For information about any of the workshops that are coming up, please visit ambrose.edu/workshops. That's a great opportunity. And then also, I just want to thank you for being here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us. Stick around in the live chat for a few minutes, and we hope to see you at our next live session.